This is Focus with Jack Caudill.
And good evening, I'm Jack Caudill. Welcome to this month's edition of Focus. This month we are looking ahead to the 2020 legislative session in the South Dakota State Legislature. Three guests with us today. Representative Mike Dietrich from Rapid City. He is in District 34, a Republican. He is one of the majority whips in the House. Representative Tom Bruner from Nisland, also a Republican. He is from District 29, which encompasses Butte, Meade, and a little bit of Pennington County. And Senator Troy Heindel, a Democrat from Mission. He is in District 26, which encompasses Brule, Buffalo, Jones, Lyman, Millette, and Todd counties. He is the Senate Minority Leader. As I said, the 95th session of the South Dakota State Legislature kicks off on January 14th with the annual State of the State address from Governor Kristi Noem. The session wraps up on March 12th. March 30th is set out to consider possible vetoes. There are 87 Republicans in the legislature for the upcoming session, 16 Democrats, no independents. We're going to start off with the issue that's gotten the most attention lately. That, of course, is hemp. Last year, the legislature passed a bill legalizing hemp. Governor Noem vetoed that. Not enough votes to override the veto. Where do we stand with hemp coming this time, and what do you expect to see happening with hemp this time?
Well, from my perspective, the hemp bill will pass the legislature again. It will be interesting to see if the governor vetoes it again or not. Representative Brunner was on the hemp summer study committee, so you have a lot more information on it. There's a good economic development to it. There were 3 processing entities that wanted to come into South Dakota to process it into rope, into boxes, and into pulling the heart out of the hemp. Bud is a nutritional item out of there. So there's economic development in there that is beyond just the agricultural side as far as the farm ag business goes.
How tough is that dynamic when the legislature is for it and the governor is so vehemently against it?
Well, it's an interesting dynamic, and the votes will not likely be the same as last year for that. The other way, another option would be for the legislature to do a resolution and put it on the ballot if they determine that it wasn't going to make it through the legislature, and that would not be something that the governor would be able to veto.
Now, Representative Brunner, as he mentioned, you were on the summer study committee for hemp. From your perspective, going through all of that, where does it stand? Where do you see it going this time?
Well, there was a lot of information brought up during the summer study, and actually good information. I think the people that are on board are still on board. I think a few people are maybe softening because of trying to tie it to other drugs, things like that. But Mike said, we have manufacturing ready to start. I chair the Ag Committee. We heard from people that are ready to start manufacturing. They're going to start someplace. Why let them go to Minnesota? It just makes sense that we should get on board with this, get down the road. I think some of the fears when it comes to law enforcement, things like that, we already have to deal with it. The federal law says we can't impede from traveling through South Dakota if they're going from Nebraska to Minnesota. For a manufacturer, we can't stop that. I think the ways to test it is they're out there. People that raise recreational marijuana have ways to test the THC. There's no reason we can't do that, and I think we've got enough safeguards written into the law. We certainly did last year, and I think there'll be probably even more so this year, that would ensure that we're going to be able to transport it safely. Nothing's going to get lost, and we just want to separate ourselves from the marijuana people and the fact that that's an illegal substance. This is not. It's a different substance altogether, and I just don't think we need to tie the hands of the farmers in this state. Granted, right now you read about the markets and whatnot, that they're not all there. They'll develop. As more product gets on the market, those manufacturers will be developed, and 60, 70 years ago, soybeans weren't all that popular either. People started raising them, and guess what? Now it's a viable crop. So I think we just need to keep moving down the road and assume that we, at some point, will get it done. Some of us have been working on these bills for several years. We've heard them in the House Ag Committee and whatnot. And now, the thing that really changed it for us is the federal law changed, and eventually we'll get there. Some of us might be longer than the governor's there, so we'll keep working on it.
Now you're a farmer yourself. From an ag
Yes.
perspective, how important is it to get this through for them?
Well, I think farmers need to be able to have a little hope that there's something out there they could grow and some diversity. Right now, we know what the ag economy is doing right now, whether you're raising livestock or crops, it's not good. Is this going to be the savior? No, it's not going to be the savior, but it's one more option that people would have. And as these markets develop, I think it could be a very, very viable option. So.
Now, Representative Troy Heinert from Mission, you were a very vocal supporter of hemp from the beginning of all of this. Where do you see it going this time through?
Well, I agree with my colleagues. I think it'll pass the legislature. I'm hopeful that the governor actually, reads the bill and looks at the bill for what it is. I've seen the draft. I think it's a very good piece of legislation. And I think the work that the summer study did, to go to these other states and how it's working in those states, bringing that data back and presenting it to us and to the governor's office. I mean, I'm hopeful that we can do this without the fight that I think everybody's expecting.
How big of an issue is it that if it remains illegal here and legal pretty much all around us?
Well, it's a huge issue. And where it's probably the biggest issue is in the transportation. I know that there's a couple tribes in South Dakota that are going down this path and have submitted the paperwork to the USDA to start hemp production. And what scares me is if this product was to be developed, and as soon as that truck driver leaves the reservation and is going across South Dakota to a manufacturing plant, they could potentially be charged with a felony. And though they're within the law in the USDA, we still have state laws that are against that. So there would be a big court fight, and that's not what we're trying to do.
Now, Troy, last year also you were very vocal about the riot boosting laws. Those went through very quickly. Parts of those turned down by a federal judge. Governor Noem says she's going to change those to try to get them through. Your reaction to her wanting to redo those in a little bit different way this time?
Well, one is I was really disappointed in how they came about last year, and I was very vocal on the floor. I didn't think they met the constitutional muster that was required. I've seen the draft that the governor sent out. There's not a lot of change in what she had proposed this year as to last. So I think she's going to have an uphill battle when it comes to bringing this legislation. At least now, hopefully, we get the people at the table to talk about it, and it has a full and fair hearing. Last year we had a joint, those two bills went in front of joint appropriations after we suspended the rules. And that's just not how we should be conducting ourselves, especially on a topic as important as that.
How about you, Representative Brewer, the pipeline coming through part of your district up there?
Yeah.
How do you look at those, the riot boosting laws and them coming back to the legislature again this year?
I certainly think there is some need to take some safeguards. I mean, we looked at originally a bill that, the counties have to fund a lot of the law enforcement and to try to give them some relief so they didn't have to spend themselves into bankruptcy doing that. I think that's what this is all aimed at. But I would agree with Troy that just the way it came about last year at the last minute, certainly, the idea was good. We needed to do something, but the way it was done and a lot of the details obviously didn't pass the constitutional muster, and we'll try again. I certainly hope that those people are at the table that put up those objections. I hope they're at the table, and this bill, well, obviously it'll get a lot more committee hearings, and usually that's where a lot of those problems are solved, is when you have a full committee hearing, the public can come and testify, people, it'll be a big deal. I mean, there's no two ways about it. The committees that hear that will have, full hearings. Last year was kind of, like I say, we suspended the rules, pushed it through an appropriations committee where nobody goes to appropriations committee except appropriators and a few people that are interested. It's the last place I want to be during session, I know that. But, so they heard a joint committee meeting, it passed it out, and, it went forward. And I don't think any of us could feel really good about that process. We know something needs to be done. We want to protect our counties, we want to protect our law enforcement, and make sure that those that would cause riots are held accountable, things like that. But we don't want to have what happened in North Dakota happen here. But by and large, we've got to do it the right way, and we've got to have a lot more vetting of the bill and go through a process where we can amend, make improvements as we go along.
Now, Representative Diedrich, as you look at this as part of the Republican leadership, what direction do you see this going this time?
Well, I think that we, as a state and as a legislature, we have to protect the property of the South Dakota residents and of the state and of the law enforcement, everyone who's involved, and the landowners in that case. And when you look at the experience of North Dakota, there's a lot of lessons to be learned on how that damage occurred and who ended up bearing the cost for that, and what was the impact on law enforcement and on the county, and also the damage that occurs from the equipment putting in the pipeline to the county roads and things, and those types of damages that occur in South Dakota. So there were two bills. One bill related to the riot boosting, and that was really intended to protect the state from someone inciting riots into action, into violence from outside the state or not even present, but either through pain or through some other way of communication or hiring people to do that. Not all protesters were in that situation, but we do know that that happened. In fact, there was a huge percentage of protesters that were not from the South Dakota or even our 5-state area. And then on the other side, the other bill was related to the pipeline putting money into a fund to help compensate counties and law enforcement and cities and landowners for damage done by them going through the roads, even though they have permits to use the roads, causes damage on those roads. And the counties and townships have a pretty limited resource to pay for those damages. And so to me, the package was protecting the rights and the property and the funds of the state of South Dakota and the governing bodies that are incorporated underneath it.
All right, we got to take a break. We'll continue our look at the 2020 legislative session, looking at the budget when we come back with this month's edition of Focus. And good evening, I'm Jack Caudill. Welcome back to this month's edition of Focus. Looking ahead to the 2020 South Dakota State Legislative Session, Representative Tom Bruner, a Republican from District 29 in Nisland. Governor Noem proposed a budget of just under $5 billion, not a lot of increases in there. As you look at that, how much is that going to change once it comes out the back end of the legislature?
Well, I think certain things are going to change a lot. You know, when we look at that and what the legislature actually can argue about is such a small part of that budget. So much of it is federal dollars, so much, you know, between the Medicaid, highway funding, things like that. You know, our general fund is, you know, somewhat over $1.5 billion. And I think that's where we really try to control that. Obviously, I think it'll change a lot. I think some things the governor left us a lot of room to work with. Maybe not intentionally, but as far as education funding goes, things like that, you know, recommending a zero increase. Of course, obviously, anything we do will be better than that. So we've heard a lot from teachers so far and school personnel that you know, it's not acceptable. 3 years ago, we changed the formula. We raised the sales tax to fund that, and here we are at zero growth. I think that's one thing that we'll really take a hard look at and try to find some dollars. But you know, we're not a flush state with extra dollars. Everything that we add one place, we have to take from someplace else, and you know, it'll be interesting where we go down that road. So it'll take a lot of debate, but I think, you know, we'll work hard on it. We'll try to find some funding for education and state employees obviously also, but knowing it's you know, somebody's ox is going to get gored when that happens. So.
Senator Troy Heinert is a Democrat from District 26. You listened to the governor's budget address as well. What did you think of that? What changes would you like to see to that?
Well, I think our caucus, and I would agree with, I would think most of the legislature, we want to follow the law when it comes to pay raises for teachers. And not only just for teachers, but that affects your whole school system. And a 0% increase doesn't mean that people are staying the same. You know, it actually makes us go backwards because things cost more now. You know, the rate of inflation is in effect, and we can't meet the accountability measures that we've established by statute with a 0% increase. So I think there's going to be a serious conversation of what can we get to schools and state employees and community support providers in the legislature. And there's people in the legislature that want to see a stronger presence of the legislature on the budgeting process. So it'll be interesting to see how big a push that we can make on the budget. You know, the economy right now is tough in South Dakota. There's lots of, our ag economy is down. I think retail is starting to hurt, especially in our small towns. we're going to have to take these matters into consideration and make some serious commitments to these individuals who need our support.
Representative Mike Dietrich, a Republican from District 34 here in Rapid City. As you look at the budget, what changes have to make? What are the priorities that you see that need to be addressed?
Well, naturally, with all the factors that affect the economy, and the governor is very conservative and wants to maintain a fiscally stable state, and we have to maintain our bond rating and have reserves and all of that. So it's going to be quite a battle between a lot of really good things to fund, but just not enough resources to do it. The education, health care, and state employees at 0%. Education, our statute says we're supposed to increase at 3%, or the level of inflation, whichever is less, which would be about 2.5% this year, I believe, and we're at 0, so we're behind on that. The state employees got some increase in their health plan, increase of state dollars into their health plan, but there was also increase in the dollars that the employees have to put in for that too. It's just the whole cost of the plan keeps going up. The things that are out there that the governor proposed was included broadband expansion, internet connectivity throughout the state radio system, a health sciences building at USD, and a couple other projects like that. So there'll be some competition, I think, for those funds, which are more discretionary, and I'm sure there'll be an effort to try to find dollars to put in education, state employees, and into health care. But to do that, you have to have a pay-for. And so the pay-for means what are we going to have to either reduce, eliminate, or find more efficient ways for government to happen. And then the one final principle is we'd like to reduce the cost of state government.
All right, we got to take another break. We'll continue our look at the 2020 state legislative session when we continue with this month's edition of Focus. I'm Jack Caudill. Welcome back to this month's edition of Focus, looking ahead to the 2020 state legislative session that kicks off on January 14th in Pierce. Senator Troy Heindel is a Democrat from Mission, District 26. Troy, any particular issues addressing the Native American community that you feel need to be addressed in Pierce this year?
Sure. And I think the riot boosting bill will gain a lot of attention from tribal people as it works its way through the legislature. But a really interesting concept that we just talked about at the State Tribal Relations meeting the other day was the establishment of the Oceti Sakowin charter schools. The data that is coming out of our public school system for Native kids, isn't comparable to our counterparts in other parts of the state. So I think the bill that they've drafted is very, very good, and I would hope to gain some support with what they're trying to do to educate kids in a different way.
Representative Tom Bruner is a Republican from Nisland in District 29, a largely rural area. What particular issues addressing the ag community in rural areas do you feel need to come up and be dealt with this year?
Well, I think, other than the hemp, everybody's kind of farm issues, farm people are certainly interested in the hemp issue. But, obviously our farm economy is kind of in the cellar. If you're selling calves or grain, and not only selling it, getting a low price, but getting it harvested because of the weather. And I think, we've done some work on as far as the state budget. The governor has some proposals that would help as far as emergencies, FEMA, disaster-related things. I think she set up a state loan fund that local entities can tap. Our roads are in bad shape because of the weather that we've had, seems like all spring, all summer, and into the fall. And I think might be some help there from the state. I don't think too many farmers would look to the state, to solve those problems of low prices. Where anytime you sell commodities, you look at market swings, and we're at a low spot. We're at a low spot for almost everything right now, and we know that'll turn around. I think, we're not looking. I don't think anybody's looking for a safety net. There's some on the federal level, a little bit, but by and large, I think communities are looking just to get together and survive. I think it is really tough out in the country, and especially in the rural areas where there just isn't enough revenue to go around, and things are difficult. But we get through it. We sometimes it requires a change in business, and that's unfortunate. Families suffer, but by and large, I think, generally our economy is good nationwide, of course, and there's a lot of jobs out there, but it's unfortunate that, sometimes a farmer has to, when he sells his crop for the year, it doesn't cover everything he needs to cover, and sometimes you have to go looking for one of those jobs, and that's unfortunate. We don't we want to see a healthy farm economy. It's the biggest part of our state economy, and we want to keep it healthy. But I'm not sure what, other than these little things around the peripheral, what the state can really do. And I think it's more of a local issue that our churches, our counties, and stuff really have to band together and take care of people, because there's a lot of bankruptcies and with bankruptcy and business failures come a lot of social issues that we really have to watch out for, and I think that's the biggest thing. People have to be encouraged and kept strong, and it's hard. I don't think that's government's job to do that, for one thing, but I think it's certainly a concern and something we're certainly looking at.
Representative Mike Diedrich, a Republican, District 34 here in Rapid City. Mike, we see the giant partisan divide in Washington these days. What do we see at the state level? Do we see any of that here? And if so, how do you lessen that, or how do you keep that from happening here?
Well, we're a small state, and our chambers are close, and we all disagree. No matter what your party, there's a variety of opinions or positions on all of the issues. We're way more civil than what they are in Washington. We're more focused. We have a limited amount of time, so we focus on the things that are important to improve the daily lives of people in South Dakota. I think that we continue to grow in understanding the responsibilities of the legislature and how to implement those in collaboration with the governor and with, but sometimes we look at it, solving problems in different ways. So it's a matter of not only us getting along on the third floor, the Senate and the House, but us getting along with the second floor to collectively come together with the solutions that are best for South Dakotans.
Now, Troy, as a Democrat, obviously you are a big minority out there in Pierre. How do you make sure that your voice is still heard and does not get lost in all of that?
Well, I think we do that by bringing good bills, and we do that by working with our Republican colleagues, explaining the need of why we brought this bill. As Democrats, probably 80% of our votes are bipartisan votes. But as a Democratic bill, we've got to work pretty hard to get that support. And, for the most part, we're well received. Of course, there's things policy differences that we have, but we're able to work through that. I think the committee level is where a lot of that work is done, explaining, why this is needed. And I'm thankful for the committee members or the committees that I sit on, that they're willing to listen to our side as well.
Got about 30 seconds. Tom, how do you see that Republican-Democrat thing working together in Pierre?
Obviously, the Republicans with the supermajority, we work together well. I thought it was a lot healthier debate when there were more Democrats, actually, because we had to work harder to get a two-thirds majority in the House, things like that. And now it seems like maybe that divide is a little bit in the Republican Party, and sometimes there's three factions on the floor arguing and whatnot. But, that's typical. We're there to beat bills around and come to a good conclusion. And, I certainly look as Democrats, any part of the Republican Party. I mean, we all work together, and at the end of the day, we're all friends, and we've got to work through it.
I got to cut you off. We are out of time. Representative Mike Dietrich, Representative Tom Bruner, Senator Troy Heindel, thank you guys for joining us. Again, session starts on January 14th. Thanks for watching this month's edition of Focus.